Welcome to the Daily Dev Talk with me, Adrian Nantchev, where we explore and share experiences, stories, and lessons 7 days a week from across the games industry, helping you make the best game you can. Stay tuned for today's episode. Good morning, Overload Nation. Welcome to another episode of the Daily Dev Talk, talking to game developers from across the world to bring you experiences, stories, and lessons 7 days a week. Today, I'm joined with Kevin Barrios from WeFiends to talk about his latest, or even better, his first PC release, Dandy, or a brief glimpse into the life of the Candy Alchemist. Kevin, talk about yourself first, please, and how you got into the games industry.
Hey there, Adrian. Well, I'm 23 now, since this week, and I started when I was 11 years old. That's when I first got any sort of program that lets me make games. And when I was 12, I sold the distribution rights to my first game to Armor Games, which was a big deal back then. You would sell the distribution rights to a sponsor, and they would put it all over the internet for people to enjoy. I was a big part of the Newgrounds scene. I made a lot of friends there. One of my friends still lives down the street from Newgrounds. If you don't know what Newgrounds is, it's a big Flash portal run by Tom Fulp, who has helped us an immense amount. Yeah, I guess that is how I started. And that's pretty much what we've been doing. We left Flash games sometime around 2008. I used to make games with a friend called David Silver. He's a good friend of mine, and he's not part of WeFiends. I wish he was. And now we make we made mobile games for a bit, and this is our first PC release. That's pretty much my history.
I can remember all my games. I remember playing Hex Empires.
Hex Empires. I don't think I've ever heard of that.
Oh, right then. I remember the Flash game strategy.
Hex
I'm not sure.
Empires.
Yeah, or Hex Empire, as well as I'm sure that's it. But I remember playing Supremacy 1914. Again, strategy.
Yeah.
Sound familiar?
No, not really. There were a lot of
Oh,
very heavy programmer type games back then that didn't appeal to me as a little kid.
all right, okay. Well, I wouldn't say they're heavy programming. There was just a lot of strategy involved, is all. So it might be not your genre.
Yeah, I guess strategy wasn't like I was 11 at the time.
Right. Well, I'm 21, so really, if it wasn't for you, then it might have been for someone
Oh,
else, even
maybe.
younger than you. But that's all right. So tell me about WeFiends. You said that you wanted someone who's a friend of yours who is not involved in it. But how many people is there, and what's the structure?
Yeah, well, WeFiends is just three of us. It's me, my brother, and Stephanie Fung. I do the art and game design. My brother does all the programming, and Steph makes this amazing music that you heard in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just three of us. We work on the pretty much only online. Obviously, I've known my brother my whole life, so we work well together. And my brother met Steph when he was in high school, so they work really well together as well. As far as structure, there isn't really one. I'd call us more of a team than anything. We're very close, and we love making games. That's pretty much our story.
That is cool to know, and that's very common as well. Love making games, and you have to like what you're playing, because if you won't play it, then the customers won't pay for it. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we've been doing it for 7 years now, and we still enjoy it just as much, if not more. We've learned to love it even more. It's a very deep thing that you can get into. There's a lot of undiscovered area because it's such a
Oh.
young
Mm.
medium.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. A lot. Oh yeah. A lot of undiscovered. So speaking of undiscovered, tell us about your latest game. Tell us about Dandy, or the brief glimpse of the life of a Candy Alchemist. Tell me about that, and what you wanted the player to experience.
That's a doozy. Okay, well, first off, I guess the cool little fact is that Dandy's actually a remake of a game that I made with David Silver, who's the person I mentioned earlier. And the reason he's not part of our team is because our team is not paid, and he,
Hmm.
being not a relative or a very very near and dear friend like Steph, uh, I don't think he'd be willing to not be paid. But I did
Hmm.
make the original with David, and it was a small flash game, and Dandy cropped up as an answer to everything that I really didn't enjoy about the original. Despite I have fondness for it because it was one of my first games that had a big following, and Newgrounds, Tom Fulp sponsored it and helped us out a ton. He made T-shirts and promoted it on Newgrounds. Um, so it Dandy, the new one, Dandy, or a brief glimpse into the life of the Candy Alchemist, started as a response to the design in the original Dandy. Everything that I didn't like and was trying to correct the mistakes. And in doing so, it was sort of like I was responding to just poor game design in the industry in general. I I don't tend to enjoy games, that might be a bad thing to say as a game designer. Um, but yeah, it was kind of an answer to a lot of problems that I saw in games, and whether we completely solved any of those issues would be up to the player, I guess.
Uh, Problems like what as regards to game design?
Just a general thoughtlessness. There's a lot of reliance on methods that have been quoted to be best practices. Things that you consider just part of a game. You see it and you think game. And honestly, the new Dandy does partake. Something like the three hearts that you see in like every game. You know, the little hearts that float up, and that counts your life.
Hmm.
That's something that you generally just look at and you take that for granted as like, yeah, that makes sense. You would put that in a game and it would help you formulate whatever that game ends up turning out to. And my goal was to really question all of those small aspects of games and give my own take on it. Or if I found out that they actually suited perfectly, then I went ahead and used them.
I see. Would you even say that you wanted the enemies to be also unique as well? Because I felt them was a little bit different as well.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to ask you, and I hope I'm not putting you on the spot. What your experience was with the game?
Oh, they're not putting me on the spot, all right. Well, Kevin. Well, you're a little man, a little bloke, a little top hat, flying in the skies, a lollipop, shooting what looks like gumdrops or yellow snowballs out of his candy cane. So first impression is like this is a bit of a strange looking game. It's a bit odd, and it's 6 a.m. and we're talking about a strange little game floating in the sky on a lollipop, strange in its own good way. Well, firstly, I liked how you couldn't tell what the pickups were that, and they were a little obscure for the first few moments, like hey, like marshmallow, blah blah, and it's just like okay, all right, it gives you a subtle idea what it's about, and or like it's like cocoa nut, and he turned into this strange Mr. Jackal
Yeah.
kind of creature, and it was just like okay, right, and then on top of that, the kind of enemies are completely all over the place. There's these, I think, orange like dolphins with spikes on
Right.
their head,
Uh,
and it's like they were horrible at first. They were easy, but after a while, they were horrible to deal with. But the worst ones were the ones that got bigger and fatter the more you shoot them,
right, the
and
green one.
you had to keep shooting it so it would die rather than just like reducing its health,
Yeah.
which is unusual.
Those are nicknamed Fatty in the code.
Ah, oh right, cool, little tidbit.
Yeah.
But those it was just like the pickups and the structure is different, and the enemies were different. And I've read this book, which is Level Up, and it talks about making things different and not avoiding generic stuff. And I think you hit the nail on the head very good here with the enemies.
Thank
and
you.
not just going for the generic things that just come at you or shoot or move around and dodge or divide into two. And you got the generic ones with the black ones with the horns, and you got the ones that you shoot and then they come at you and all sorts. It really is different in that regard. That's what I like about it.
Thanks. Yeah, yeah. Well, the reason I asked you is because I really do feel like, as a game designer, okay, this is gonna sound odd. What I'm trying to do is set something up for the player to. I mean, this is just general sense, right? I'm setting something up for the player to experience, but I really don't feel like the game is done or even exists until the player is playing it. And to me, that kind of drove a lot of what the enemies are like. And I don't want to spoil anything for anyone that's listening and might play the game, but there's a lot more to the enemies than you initially see. And the way that I would explain that, I guess, is that there are very the game cares very much about what the player is doing, and you have to figure that out as you play it. And I don't know if you reach that moment, um, but that did drive the game, and because basically you're creating the moments with your own input in a very binary way. It's either you're doing something or you're not, and the game responds to that immediately in a game way.
Mm. Is that does that give those statues, the little smiley faces along that track line? Does that give them any significance?
There's significance to everything. It's all very much tonal.
Mm.
I'm not trying to say anything or tell a story. It's setting a mood and kind of saying something about what the game is and the people that made it. But it's very abstract, and I couldn't give you a synopsis for any of that.
Okay, okay. Well, can you at least give us a synopsis as to how you went about promoting the game, what strategies worked, and what didn't work so well?
Sure. We did a lot. So we did social media, of course, a live interview on Twitch. We had a failed Kickstarter. We did 2 live action trailers with Hans van Harken. We shotgunned press emails. I made a short series on game design. I did a lot. And in short, none of it really worked. If by worked I mean sold us more copies of the game. Um, being on by the way, did you get to watch those trailers?
No.
Okay, I won't mention them then. Okay,
Right.
so
Okay.
being on Steam Greenlight and Steam itself has been really the most successful marketing as far as selling games. Just being on there, and I mean, I wouldn't take that route if you're an indie person. I would figure out the problem a little better. I don't I wouldn't say that we particularly put a lot of thought into it. We just did as much as we could.
Wait. Going back a tiny bit, you said you wouldn't tick that box as indie developer, meaning that you wouldn't solely rely on Steam Greenlight.
Yeah, yeah, I wouldn't solely rely on Steam Greenlight and Steam on its own, but I also don't feel like anything I did was that great either. So it's like I can't give
Mm.
a solution. I'm just saying that worked the best for us. It wasn't quite a huge push, so I would find a new solution for the next time.
Why do you think it wasn't the best for you?
uh, all the stuff that we did, it,
Just didn't work.
it just didn't work. I mean, it was great. We got a lot of response and but it didn't convert to sales. If you're gonna be kind of that way about it,
Hmm. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I
and I
understand.
can't explain it. If I could explain it, then I would because I'm sure it would be very helpful to me personally as well as any other indie dev.
Hmm.
But yeah,
I get you.
no
I get you.
answer.
So, aside from the failed Kickstarter campaign, how is it you went about funding the game?
we didn't. We didn't really. I live with my girlfriend, and she basically let me keep doing it. I'm
Mhm.
actually not even sure how Nick and Steph get by at all. We came out of a unfortunate contract job where we ended up working for free for almost a year. And as great of an experience as that was from a design standpoint and learning just uh, in general, we did end up um, with no money. And this game has been in development for a very long time, for coming up on a year and a half, or maybe even past a year and a half, for very very little, whatever we could get freelance or whatever. There wasn't really much freelance either. It's a lot of work
Mhm.
to make a game, and to make the game we wanted to, we had to give it 100% of our focus.
I understand. So speaking of focus, then, how did you go about getting feedback for the game and QA in the game?
Again, maybe we're just terrible developers, but we didn't really. We did give out a demo during the Kickstarter phase. That was really not up to my standards. But we did get some very good feedback. In general, it was about making it more user friendly, which is a huge lesson that I took away from all of this, to make things good for the person that is going to be playing your game, because they're the most important part. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, it was just me and whatever friends felt like playing the game. And honestly, any feedback you get from your friends is, if not completely useless, not terribly useful, because they're your friends and they're going to tell you that your game is great. And honestly, I would maybe send it out to other people, but in the end, I went with my gut, and it's a risky way to design a game, because you don't know
Mhm.
what everyone is gonna react when they see it. But it's honestly my favorite way to make a game. I've done it testing a lot, sending it out to people, and there's something that happens where it gets a little watered down. So keeping it in the team, um, especially such a tiny team, I think creates more of a distilled product. Uh,
Mhm.
yeah,
Okay.
that's my.
So speaking of distilled product, then, what was removed from the game and why?
You name it. As far as like if you list individual components of the game, um, art assets, enemy designs, fully programmed enemies, fully programmed power-ups, tons of art. The way that we develop games is very much test something, see if it works. If it doesn't work, you throw it away. It's iterative in the most zany way, because we end up trying everything. I'm not sure on the final count of enemies, but I do know there were probably over 20 that were left out, simply because
Mm.
they weren't the best for what we were trying to do. Um, some of them were contrived because of human failure, and then some
Mhm.
of them were just not quite good enough to be part of the game, especially for the kind of experience that we were going for. So,
Okay. So, what was the biggest thing you learned while working on the game?
um, well, with a project that goes on for a year and a half, or whatever it's been, you learn a lot. Obviously, from the technical standpoint of, like, you learn to draw better. I personally learned how to paint. All our painting stuff is just me trying to figure out how the hell that works. Um,
Mhm.
and we learn to communicate. I'd say that's the number one thing. We learned to communicate really well. Um, Somewhere along the line, right after our Kickstarter failed, we really like got got on it about talking to each other, because that was our biggest stumbling block. So we learned how to talk, and I personally learned how to listen to the team, and to the game, and to people that were like looking at the game, or even my friends, and to myself, when I knew that something was how there was something that I wanted to be a certain way, and I knew that it was too hard to do it, and then I would psych myself out. So I learned to listen to myself and stick with what I knew was right. I think it's the most important skill, to be able to listen to everything. Even you could be listening to a song on the radio, and maybe it'll give you the answer to a problem that you've been working on for a month. Um, yeah, maybe that sounds
Mm.
ridiculous, but That's sort of how that's my big lesson for this project.
Interesting. Everything could be useful.
Yeah.
So, what was the worst thing that happened, and how did you overcome it?
I'd say probably the failed Kickstarter. Mostly, I can't see it was a complete waste of time, because we got a little bit of a following, we got some important feedback, but yeah, it did hold us back a couple months of dev time that we spent making promotional artwork that wasn't completely reusable. A lot of the artwork that we make to promote is reusable. We could put it in the game or use it for something else. But the Kickstarter stuff requires a lot of very specific Kickstarter stuff. So yeah, Kickstarter was our biggest setback, and the way we got through it was just to push through and just keep going.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, I get you. Keep going. So, what was the best game dev purchase you made? Whether it was a top quality piece of hardware, software, equipment, or simply a comfortable chair, good desk, or a second monitor.
Um, is that for my entire development career?
Oh, no, for this game.
Oh, for this game.
Hmm.
Small service things. We got, I guess, we Dropbox, Jira by Atlassian. Just little tools that help us be productive. Other than that, nothing that I didn't already have. We've been making games for a while, so.
Okay. And what game development related book, lecture, or learning resource can you recommend?
Mm. Well, it depends what stage you are, I guess, in making games. If you just started and you're trying to learn the technical stuff, like how to animate or how to learn to program, any of that stuff, then just Google is your best friend. And I'm sure you already know that if you're even remotely interested in game design.
Mm-hmm.
But really, I think the better question is there's so much stuff. You go on Google, you type something in, and you get like a million answers on every single thing that you could possibly want to know, and it's too much. So I think a good question would be, how do you wade through all of that and find the stuff that really matters? And I would say that you need to make sure that the person writing something is proven. It's something that you enjoy. Like they've made something that you enjoy, or they, I think that's the main thing. They've made something that you like. If you're more advanced, obviously, it's my philosophy to avoid just following best game design practice or best practice for anything really. Like you should be thinking for yourself. And if you are watching something, if you're watching a talk by someone and they sound real smart, the way to tell if they're actually saying anything of value or saying something that will genuinely help you is that they're probably not talking about any game design in specific. They're not going to tell you how many hearts you should put in your game or how many polygons will make it the best experience. If it's a game designer giving you advice, they're probably talking about the greater puzzle of what a game or maybe not even a game specifically, but what the universe says about certain things. And the only way to give you a really straight answer, my favorite talk, if you want to know what I'm talking about, is a talk called Psalm 46 by Brian Moriarty. And the game, it's about games, but it's also not about games. And if you listen to that, you'll know what I'm saying because I probably sound like a rambling madman.
Psalm 46 by Brian Moriarty.
Yeah, Professor Brian Moriarty.
Okay.
That's a fantastic talk.
Okay. Moriarty sounds like a villain from a.
From Sherlock, yeah.
That's it. I was gonna say Shakespeare, but no, Sherlock. Yeah, a novel. So yeah, like an Evernote or Trello, do you have a useful or productivity enhancing software, app, extension, or website worth sharing?
Well, honestly, the most useful has been Dropbox. Just being able to share files, and we got the upgrade one. I'm not sure how big it is, but it lets us send like all the files that we could ever want to each other. And we also have a thing called Jira by Atlassian, which
Oh
is,
yes, yeah.
just lets us note what tasks we have to do, and it lets you make subtasks, and it's honestly like doubled our productivity, so I can't recommend it enough.
Okay. So Kevin Barrios, Kevin, what advice can you give to aspiring game developers, small indie studios, and people trying to get to where you are today?
Ask questions. Ask why for everything. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just have to know how it works, and why it works. And I think I say that in some video that I made once, but I think it's true. You need to ask why for everything you're doing. Is there a better way to do this thing? Sure, it works. Maybe right now I don't have the resources to do better, but let me figure out what is better so that when I do have the resources, I can do that thing. That would be my advice. I think it works for everyone.
That's really cool. Ask everything. Ask all the time. I agree with that, and I understand that. Well, Kevin, it appears that we're out of time for this episode of the Daily Dev Talk. It was really, really good talking to you, and a few things really worth considering. Like, for example, checking out Psalm 46 by Professor Brian Moriarty. It's a bit of a letdown that your Kickstarter campaign didn't work, but at the same time, you still ended up removing loads and loads of stuff from the game, as though you didn't, as though the funding didn't really matter in a way. Well, it didn't actually, but still, a good experience worth sharing.
We're just, I don't know, passionate, I guess, crazy maybe.
Exactly. And that drove the entire process forward.
Yeah.
But it was great talking to you.
Yeah,
I wish
thanks
you well.
for having me.
So stay tuned, Overload Nation. More videos to come. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Daily Dev Talk with me, Adrian Nantchev. If you are a game developer that wants to get your name and game out there and to share your experiences and stories, or you have feedback or opinions of the show, then contact me at info@gameoverload.co.uk. That's info@gameoverload.co.uk. Stay tuned for tomorrow's episode. More to come.